Hey there everybody, AJ back again for the Mighty Glue Stick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full time thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. Mostly for Forgotten Realms, but also covering other settings and very occasionally every other role-playing game in existence, if I have the time. Today, a homebrewed monster, based very roughly on the Onmoraki, a Japanese yokai, or monstrous entity from their folklore. This one takes some of the thematic parts of that monster, and I think it comes from a rather unique manuscript from Japanese history dating back to 1779. It's called the Illustrated 100 Demons from the Present and the Past, which started off as some fictional work of fancy, a bunch of illustrations and text, but became so popular that the monsters worked their way into the general folklore and mythology of Japan. So essentially, it's exactly like Slenderman phenomenon of the last decade or so, starting off as a pure meme, and now something of a blockbuster horror movie with Slenderman starring in it. And I bet you in a few more years there will be people who swear black and blue that they saw Slenderman and he is absolutely real, and they will probably have some sort of sketchy evidence that and there'll be a documentary on Discovery Channel about it. Mark my words. So, what is the original Onmoraki? Onmoraki came from the bodies of the recently deceased, where people die but do not receive enough memorial prayer. Their life energy can transform into this grotesque bird-like demon. And they typically go and molest monks, and they've got a particular type of attack technique that they use against them. So I like the general idea of the tormented soul. I mean, what is the backstory of this monster's life before it died? I imagine a person who is evil and shunned by everyone, who dies suddenly in their sleep, and the body just unceremoniously is dumped into the pit of an unmarked grave, perhaps by some debt collector this person owed money to who found their corpse. The soul of this loner is confused, perhaps hovering in the border ethereal plane, seeing their own body dug up by stray dogs and torn apart, feasted on by vermin, and finally the pecking and squabbling of carrion birds over the last scraps. With each shred of flesh consumed, the lost soul is shrieking and screaming in torment as any chance of returning to the material world is torn away from it. But it cannot face up to the reality that it's actually dead, and with every moment that it is without a physical form, it feels like it is just going to fade away into nothingness, a formless, horrific dread of the unknown. At first it desperately tries to get back into its own body, but the flesh is too far gone and will not sustain any sort of spirit. But as a carrion bird rips off a shred and gulps it down, the spirit feels the vitality of the bird and realizes it can try and slip inside. A mind already confused and tormented is now trying to fit inside the bird's body, but it can't do it, and the bird dies horribly from the brutal possession. The negative energy of the lost soul rapidly decaying the flesh as it attacks and tears into the flesh of another bird and then another, trying to fit all of itself into more and more of them at the same time. From the perspective of a street sweeper who witnesses this gruesome and chaotic scene, there is a flock of all sorts of birds in some sort of frenzy over the mostly skeletal remains of someone dug up out of the ground, and the birds are fighting frantically against being absorbed and blended together in some horrific mockery of a living thing, of a mass of rotting bird parts which seem to be in the rough shape of a humanoid. Paralyzed with fear, the street sweeper drops a broom and bucket with a clatter, and the bird thing stops, and it turns those eyes, those burning green flame eyes of undeath, right at him. He barely has time to scream before the thing attacks. It opens a rotting maw with the beaks of dead birds in place of fangs and tears into the neck with a fountain of blood. Rendered limb from limb, now absorbed into this thing, the street sweeper's soul pops out into the border ethereal where gleaming light beckons him away. Behind him, a vortex of darkness thrusts itself into the material plane. With a mind consumed with a desperation and rage to return to itself to life by any means, the monstrous physical form, part man, part bird, is gradually rotting away around a core of surging negative energy, the breach from the negative energy plane into the positive plane by this thing's torment and horror. Its mind is also splintered, its memories are chaos. The minds of shrieking birds and screaming victims make up the decaying brain stuff that it has stolen from other creatures, but it remembers it needs to find those who can end this torment, and so it seeks out clerics, priests, paladins, anyone who has any sort of connection to the gods. Finding a priest The thing tries to communicate, but it can't think straight. It has no words of its own. Its mind is shattered. And it is still a part of the ethereal plane where memories echo and manifest themselves. And so it reads the memories of this priest and tries to make sense of them. But flooded with negative energy, pain and torment, every thought is twisted, every effort turns to darkness, savagery and evil, and that's the only things that it can see. The priest can only hear its own voice echoing out of the darkness, speaking his own worst memories and the things he wishes to never share with the world. Dread, horrible things. The monster sees the priest recoil in horror at his words, and then cry out in terror as he sees the thing's monstrous form as it lurches out of the ethereal plane. Time is short. The body parts are already rotted away to nothing but bone and slime, so if the priest cannot offer help one way, at least his fresh meat can be put to use. Crying out in frustration and rage, negative energy blasts out of the monster in the form of a jet of green flame breath, before the thing lashes out with grasping bone fingers and bird talons, that terrible face, part man, part bird, with blackened bird fang beaks for fangs. The Onmoraki claims another victim. Okay, so let's stat this beastie up, shall we? Type is undead, obviously. It's medium size and humanoid in shape with bird and human parts. It probably always looks slightly different, so there wouldn't be a stock standard form for an Onmoraki. They would take on a different bird, humanoid, possibly vermin humanoid form and every different time that it manifests. It has a claw and bite attack as well as a breath weapon of necrotic flame. It's terrifyingly ugly to look at, obviously, and it tries to communicate with its victims before it attacks. But, of course, it can't do so. It just manifests itself as a mental assault. So it sneaks about in shadow, so it can perhaps move through the shadow veil or slip in and out of the border ethereal space as it moves about, before popping into sight with a blast of that flame breath and then a savage melee assault. This reminds me a lot of the habits of the phase spider, with the breath weapon of a hellhound, except it's necrotic damage, and physically it's very similar to a ghast in every other respect, which, when you look at the challenge rating, seems to be on point. The Ghast is challenge rating 2. The abilities borrowed from the Hellhound and Phase Spider are both challenge rating 3, which would combine to make this a challenge rating 3 creature overall. At least. Challenge rating 3, maybe even 4 pushing it. So it is physically not that tough, but has some abilities that make it a tricky creature in a fight. So this is what we end up with. I'll put the stat block up on the screen here. On Meraki, it's a medium undead chaotic evil. Armor class 13, hit points 36, so 8d8 hit points. Speed is 30 feet. Fairly average stats. Its mental abilities obviously are not very high. It's got fairly good strength, dexterity, average constitution. Resistance to necrotic damage. It is actually rotting itself, so necrotic damage is something which affects it. So it's desperate to avoid rotting even more. So it's got immunities to being poisoned, charmed, exhaustion, and of course it's undead. It's got sense of dark vision out to 60 feet, passive perception of 10. It can't speak any language apart from its vile whispers ability. It's got an ethereal jaunt, exactly the same as a phase spider. Its vile whispers abilities, I think we'll have that so that it can only use it while it's concealed within the ethereal plane, because it's whispering out of the darkness. The victim needs to make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened for 1 minute, and if it fails the saving throw by 5 or more, the target becomes paralyzed as long as it's got the frightened condition. If it saves against the frightened condition, then it's immune to, then the paralysis also ends, and it's immune to further attacks by that specific Onmoraki for 24 hours. Its entropic flame, instead of having a cone like the Hellhound, I think it's more fitting with the original intent in the artwork of the Japanese folklore that it be a 15-foot line of flame, like a jet of flame, so it's basically blasting out at a specific target. Each creature in the path must make a DC 12 dexterity saving throw. Obviously, if they're paralyzed with the fear effect, they can't make that saving throw, so they'll get automatically hit, taking 21 or 66 necrotic damage on a failed save, half as much on a successful one. And the Onmoraki would only do this once during any combat encounter to stick with the original theme. Claw attacks, bite attacks. The bite attack would also have the necrotic damage of its flame breath as well, so fairly straightforward. A challenging encounter for a number of reasons. First, this creature can move in and out of the ethereal plane. while low-level characters are unlikely to be able to do much about that unless they are well prepared for this specific monster due to research and gaining some in-game resources to deal with it. For example, they may locate information from eyewitnesses, from a local sage, witch doctor or cleric, and then buy some ghost candles, which are a common wondrous item. They light these black candles and it burns with a dark smoky flame. It only illuminates creatures in the border ethereal plane, making them visible as though they just stepped into the light of a normal candle illumination, except they shine with a creepy green glow. This makes it easier to track the Onmoraki and negates its ability to pop out of nowhere and attack with advantage. It can still use its Vile Whispers ability unless the player characters also find a way to harm ethereal creatures they can't do much other than block their ears, or ring bells, or hammer on metal pipes, or some other method of drowning out the sound, because this is actual whispers. A magical ring that protects against negative energy is not usually something that characters would have at lower levels, but again, they might have access to expendable wondrous items to take care of that for them. Probably something inconvenient and expensive, or more than a little creepy, such as, let's see, corpse butter. Which must be smeared all over the body and results in a vile smell, possibly a rash or saving throw against contracting filth fever if accidentally smeared across any open wounds. But it grants resistance to negative energy damage and advantage on saving throws against the atropic flame breath of the Onmoraki, which could really be quite important. Thus prepared, this creature actually is less dangerous overall than a challenge rating 2 Ghast, as it pops out of the always pops out of the ethereal plane to attack the living, particularly if its Vile Whispers are not working. That being said, without any preparation or warning, this is a very dangerous creature that, if played to its full potential, can freak out your players and result in a total party kill. So, weak as its physical attributes are, the potential to split the party with fear effects, possibly paralysing a victim before hitting them with a blast of negative energy they can't avoid, and then tearing them to shreds before popping back into the ethereal plane, this is one nasty supernatural hunter-killer. A consummate hit and fade murder beast. Luckily, all it really takes is a moment of honest one-on-one melee combat and this thing will be quickly dispatched. It doesn't have a lot of physical abilities to withstand being torn apart by ordinary weapon attacks. It's not resistant to ordinary mundane damage. Plus, it is driven by the uncontrollable needs of the undead, so it is really locked into a pattern of behaviour that is not capable of adapting to suit different circumstances. So it has a lower intelligent wisdom to reflect this deficiency, and its tactics in play are pretty much set in stone, with clever players learning its tricks pretty quickly, I would expect. So there you have it. A mighty glue-stick homebrew undead creature to throw into your campaign, or serve as the focus of a nice simple whodunit one-shot game tracking down a supernatural killer. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you again very soon. If you enjoy this sort of homebrew content from me, let me know in the comment section down below, and I challenge you to come up with some a specific sort of scenario or creepy effect or something that you use this creature for, and share it with everyone down below, and let's see if we can come up with some sort of combat encounters that would really make this creature shine.